You had mentioned earlier, Dennis, $150 per space per month. Is that any parking space in downtown or in garages or on the street, or, you know, and what is loaded into that in terms of, is that street maintenance, sewer maintenance underneath? I mean, what are the costs associated?
It's a pretty general number, but it's basically assumes an above grade, open air parking structure like you have across the street at Civic Center. It's basically for operations and maintenance and debt service. So if you want to pay for all those things, that's the number that you generally come up with, is something in that range. And again, it depends on how much the actual facility costs and what your actual maintenance costs. But on average, around the country.
But you're talking about structure.
Yeah, structure parking. Yeah. The parking structures are expensive. The average is $15,000 a space around the country right now, and if you go below grade, it's 1.5 to 2.5 times, depending on how far below grade you go. And if you do some really fancy mixed use and architectural treatments, I mean, you can get up to $30,000, $40,000 a space, and that gets to be pretty significant investments over time.
Have you looked at our parking structure here? What's our underlying cost per month? Is this $150 applied to across the street?
I haven't really done the analysis for this.
Greg, would you know that?
No, I couldn't speak authoritatively about that right now. I think we came in closer to 13,000 on just the parking deck alone, excluding the conference center and the seating for Harrison Square. We were closer to 13,000 a space for that road.
But the I think it's important to note that where the systems in the country, where the municipal systems that are actually, where the parking systems are self-supporting, self-sustaining, it's because they've aligned their parking revenues from on-street and enforcement and off-street facilities into one fund. And as a group of funds, those things can eventually get you to where you can pay for all your parking and your maintenance reserves and your operating costs, and set aside some money for future capital projects to build that next garage that you need 5 years down the road. And that's the way that systems have been able to do that, by aligning all those revenue streams. And in some places like Boulder, where they have special assessments and those other kind of fee and lieu systems in place, all that money goes into basically planning and parking. But again, they also do a lot of other things with those funds in Boulder, because once you start getting one or two of these facilities paid off, then the whole dynamics change, and you start being able to really quickly ramp up with some parking reserves and do a much more effective job of developing new facilities, or in Boulder's case, supporting transportation alternatives, because that's a major priority for them. And they like to look at their eco pass, as they call it, where they give every downtown employee a free bus pass. It's sort of a triple benefit. A, if they tried to provide a car for everybody that might potentially drive downtown, their street system couldn't handle that much traffic, so they don't even want to do that. Environmentally, they don't want to do that anyway. So they use parking pricing, and they kind of keep a lid on the amount of parking availability that they have as a demand management strategy. But again, it kind of comes back to what's your philosophy in terms of parking and how you're managing parking to support the overall needs of the downtown. I don't think you guys are in that Boulder mode here. But we did hear pretty strong support for supporting having these cooperative and collaborative programs with CityLink and the transit programs, and thinking creatively about that. Yeah.
Isn't really what's going on here is taking the pool of parking and figuring out how to subsidize parking structures. You're reallocating resources because you can get the free, the guy that's paying $0.25 an hour, and you're in essence covering $150 a month space in a structure. Whereas your cost on on-street parking, you've got indirect costs in maintaining streets and all that, but it's a lot less expensive. That whole system, that revenue stream is being directed at structures.
Well, first of all, let me say that this is just a concept for how parking can be self-supporting. We're not necessarily recommending the realignment of parking revenues from where they currently go. That's something I think should be looked at, but it's certainly not anything that is on the critical path here. It's something I would think about if I was analyzing the entire system, but it's certainly not anything that needs to get in the way of moving something like this forward. But if you ask the question, can parking be self-supporting? my answer would be that's the kind of model that we've seen be successful in other communities where they've done that kind of alignment of resources. Because you're right, the on-street costs are much lower. The enforcement costs are much lower. They don't have the capital intensive debt service that the structures have. Even parking lots are more expensive to maintain and develop, and the land is expensive. So, yeah, I mean, to some degree, those other program elements are helping to subsidize the overall program.